one of the things that this defense has been able to do. Out of 15 games, they've had 7 games where they held opponents to 7 points or less in the first half.
Today's Friday, December 28th, and this is the Cowboys Beat with Ari and Conn on CLNS Media. I'm Ari Temkin, along with Patrick Conn, and we got a lot to get to today. We'll talk a little bit about the rest versus rust discussion, which is, well, it's overplayed at this point, but we'll get ready for the Giants game. Plus, I want to ask Patrick, what is the most important move the Dallas Cowboys made in the calendar year of 2018, since, of course, this is the final podcast we'll do in 2018. So what's the best move, most important move the Cowboys made in 2018? But Patrick, you were always sticking your nose in, different kinds of analytics and breaking down drives and just looking at different aspects of the team that I always find to be interesting. So what have you uncovered lately?
I've been looking at the drive numbers as far as how the offense has performed. I kind of wanted to compare it against how they did in the NFC East. How do they compare against, the division leaders in the NFC, and really looked at how they compared towards, looking at the potential wild card matchup, whether it's Seattle, whether it's Minnesota. And truthfully, the numbers aren't great, but as far as where they rank amongst their peers in the NFC East, they're not terrible. So I guess you could say that the Cowboys are the tallest midget in the NFC East. Because if you compare them to a Los Angeles or New Orleans, they just completely dwarf them.
Okay, so in terms of what?
If you look at touchdown percentage, because I don't think it's fair if you just look at numbers and say, oh, well, this team had 38 touchdowns. I'm like, okay, well, how many drives did they have?
Right.
Because I need to know percentage, because we both know that the Dallas Cowboys offense is different than New York, Philadelphia, or Washington, for the simple fact, or maybe they're similar to Washington now, when Alex Smith was there, because they're very ball control. We're going to run the football. We're going to play good defense. Those are, that's different than what Philadelphia tries to do, where they try to, they really put a premium on throwing the ball. And, so sometimes those numbers can be skewed a little bit, but I just kind of wanted to see now, offensively, Philadelphia is better as far as, if you go like number of punts per drive or per drives, it's 35.8%. Dallas right there at 38.2. I mean, they're very similar, but Philadelphia has one more punt than the Cowboys do. But Philadelphia has the ball more. Why? Because their drives are shorter. Why? Because they have shorter drives, in terms of time of possession, so they're going to get more drives per game. So I just kind of want to see where they stand and how they've done. If you look at it, Dallas has the highest scoring percentage amongst the NFC East. If you take a look at all their drives, now they have the second fewest drives where they actually scored. But if you look at it on a percentage base, they have the highest percentage. Why? Because of that way that they play football. Control the clock, put pressure on the defense by running the football, force them to stop you. And they're at 39.6%. And honestly, if you were to think back without looking at these numbers, you would probably think that number is lower, just because of the way the perception is with the Dallas Cowboys offense right now. Right.
And that's a great point, too. I mean, you can't really compare. It's not an apples-to-apples discussion when you look at the total volume, of touchdowns or scores, because, as you said, right, like that's not the style for which they play. So if you look at the drive percentage, obviously drives that end in touchdown and what the percentage is, then that kind of takes into account the differentiation between the volume. I mean, we see these kind of analytics in the NBA where, if teams go up into the floor and have more possessions, then you can't go at, points per game. You have to go at points per 100 possessions, since, the average amount of possessions in a game is 100 possessions, that kind of thing. So it's the same sort of, crafting the analytics in a way that makes them make sense when comparing two different styles of offense. Where do they stack up with the rest of the teams in the NFC, though? Because it's obvious that they are head and shoulders above the NFC East, if they beat the Giants tomorrow, they'll basically end the season, or beat the Giants on Sunday, they'll basically end the season with one conference loss, which was to Washington early on in the year, but they swept the Eagles. They'll be able to sweep the Giants and then win that second from the Eagles, or from the Redskins, or Giants.
Yeah. If you look at them, you compare them to Chicago. Their offenses are very similar to Chicago in terms of where they stack up. And Chicago has scored more touchdowns, but also when you got to look at that, Chicago had roughly 13 more drives this season than the Cowboys up until this point. So they have 11 more touchdowns than the Cowboys. Well, they had 13 more drives, so that's 13 more opportunities that they had. So you can look at those.
So it certainly seems like the style. It certainly seems like the style the Cowboys are trying to play is not like. Shouldn't you want to have more possessions in a game, and therefore you'd be scoring more points throughout the course of the game?
Yeah, I would think you would think that, but the way that they like to play is they like to punish people. So when they get punish them. So when they get later in games in the third and fourth quarter, they can play that ball control where they eat the clock. I mean, the Cowboys, if they had their way, they'd be having 16 play drives, 16 plays, 10 minutes every time they're going up and down the field. Why? Because it takes a large toll on them. And, that was one of the reasons, and I just want to mention this because I know we're going to get into it, but that was one reason why the Bucs were able to stay in the game is because Dallas wasn't doing that. If Dallas was able to control the clock the way that we all expected them to against a very bottom-of-the-barrel defense that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers put out there, we would have expected that. But because they weren't able to do that, you saw what happens. And that's why the Cowboys need to do that, why they need to play ball control. Because I think if they can, because we know how high-powered offense that Tampa Bay offense is. And so it's like you look at it you saw it against New Orleans. Dallas was able to keep the ball away from them, and when they did have the ball, they weren't able to do much because of that stifling style of defense. And those are the things that they're going to have to do if they want to make a run in the playoffs.
Do you think that style is conducive to winning the playoffs?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. Ball control, playing defense. Yeah, if you go back and look, and I looked at it, 7 out of the last 10 Super Bowl champions had a top 5 defense.
Interesting.
Or 6 out of 10. 7 out of 10 had at least a top 8. I believe New England 3 years ago or 4 years ago, they had a top 8 defense, but every other team had a top 10 defense.
In terms of scoring?
Top 5. Scoring defense, allowing points per game allowed.
Interesting. And what about offensively?
Offensively, it was all over the place. I mean, there were some that had a mid-tier offense at top 15. So it wasn't always, the best offense wins. It was a culmination of the two things together. But primarily it was having a top level defense. I guess you could say the outliers were actually the New York Giants in 2011. They had the
9-7 Giants.
I think they were 25th in defense.
Wow.
Scoring defense. Yeah, and they were able to, get a defensive performance that helped them win the Super Bowl. So you're going to have the outliers, right? But for the most part, there is a blueprint, and that's going to be play good defense and allow your offense to be able to take over games. Allow your offense to do enough just to help out your defense. And those are the type of things that the Cowboys have. I mean, you look at it, they have a top 5 defense, and they just need to get enough from their offense to help out their defense.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think, they have one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in football. They have a top 5 receiver, Amari Cooper, at least has proven he could be a top 5 guy since he's been here. And, I mean, you look at the way they won in their 5-game winning streak, right? I mean, it was, in the game against the Redskins and the Eagles, it was basically just because Amari Cooper went off. But in the other games, you're talking about a really good defensive effort coupled with, Zeke Elliott being able to make enough plays when it counted, getting him in the end zone. I mean, I think about the Atlanta game. I think about the Saints game. So you kind of look at that 5-game winning streak, and some games they were reliant upon Zeke, and then other games they were reliant upon Amari.
Well, I think we lose sight of one of the things that this defense has been able to do. And out of 15 games, they've had 7 games where they held opponents to 7 points or less in the first half. This defense is, giving the Cowboys opportunities, like the game against Washington. They hold them to 7 points at the half, and the Cowboys lose the game by 3. So the offense has got to be able to, pick up some of the slack. And yeah, Amari Cooper's going to help. Dak playing better is going to help. But ultimately, with the last 2 weeks, we've seen the offense kind of struggle without any impact from Amari. It's been very, very small. Yes, they did beat the Buccaneers, but that loss against the Colts, they couldn't really get him going. And I think with a stronger defensive team, if they would have played a stronger defensive team last week, I don't know that they win. Just for the simple fact that he's been such a big part of it, I think they need him, moving forward. But with the way Zeke is playing, and they actually got Dak running last week, he was only sacked once. He didn't turn the ball over, which he had been doing for the last few weeks. So, it was, it's going to fall on those 3 players, in my opinion, on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, but you look at Tampa and he was sacked once, but he was really sacked a second time, but they got lucky because Vita Vea grabbed his face mask. But that was such a huge sack, and we've seen Dak take a lot of those sacks in the red zone. It was the first play in the red zone, and he's immediately dropping back and trying to escape the pocket, and we've seen him before just get, smashed from behind. And they were fortunate that Vita Vea grabbed his face mask. But, you're not going to play teams like Tampa that kill themselves in the red zone in the playoffs.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing where it's like, can the type of offense that the Cowboys want Dak Prescott to play, can that work against, some pretty good defenses? Seattle, we already saw earlier this year. Now, I know these 2 teams are completely different, but they're more than likely going to play Seattle in the first round, unless Seattle loses to the Cardinals, who are the worst team in football, and then the Vikings beat the Bears. It's the only way the Cowboys wouldn't play the Seahawks. So look at the Seahawks, and, Frank Clark and Bobby Wagner, even without Earl Thomas, that's still a defense that can get after you. So some of the things that I think they've sort of been able to get away with in recent weeks, I don't know that they can do that against a team that's dynamic on defense like Seattle.
Oh, absolutely. And that's going to be, and that's one of the things I was looking into the Seattle's offensive charts. They get a lot more drives. They punt more than any, between them, Dallas and Minnesota when I looked at them, but they punt more. And they have basically the same number of drives as the Cowboys. What was the deal is they have, 10 less field goals. They have 12 more touchdowns. And their turnovers, they've turned the ball over 10 times this season. That's it. That's their deal. They protect the football, they run the football very well, and they play good defense. So, that's, the Cowboys in Seattle are built very similar. And, why? Well, Chris Richard. But even before Chris Richard, the Cowboys, that was kind of their copycat. That's kind of the team that they were trying to build, because we all know when you have success in the NFL, the teams are going to copy that. And you could say that they expected Dak Prescott to be their Russell Wilson. What did they do? They built in a good defense with a young quarterback on a rookie contract, a good run game. Teams are built similar. It's just offensively, Seattle is just so far superior to the Cowboys offensively. But that's the type of team that they want to be. But so yeah, it's going to be a tough fight. And can they get these red zone issues fixed? I don't know. It's and I know the talk, and I know we're going to get into it in a little bit. The talk is, they shouldn't rest the players; they need the reps. I don't think that you're going to fix that in a week.
No, I don't think so.
This has been an ongoing issue all season long. And so it's nothing like even the acquisition of Amari Cooper, that it didn't really help. So he is don't get me wrong, he's a really good receiver, but they need that big red zone target, which, they have one on the team, they just won't use him.
Rico Gathers.
In that circle. Yeah, Rico Gathers. I don't care what anybody has to say about the guy. When you got a guy who's 6'8" and or 6'6", 6'7", I don't know what he is. Let's just say he's 6'8". He can go up and rebound a ball, but you won't throw him a jump ball not once. Just try it. That's all I'm asking.
That's Patrick.
Try something.
That's Patrick Conn. I'm Ari Temkin. This is the Cowboys Beat on CLNS Media. All right. I want to get into, Patrick, what you think is the most important move in 2018 for the Dallas Cowboys. The reason the Cowboys are where they are is because of this move, and it's not just this season. I mean, the whole calendar year of 2018. But first, I need to tell you about Roman, and this is amazing. Roman is revolutionizing the industry. Look, we know this. Guys are terrible at taking care of their health, whether it's a knee injury or a bad back or something worse. Guys are usually more comfortable rubbing some dirt on it than seeing a doctor. I'm guilty of it myself. I mean, I'm not really sleeping much. I have a newborn kid. I'm not taking care of myself the way that I should be. So I'm dealing with different pains, and it's like, oh, I'll just hope that they go away, right? Like, I just never think to actually take care of the things that are wrong, right? The same's true for erectile dysfunction. Studies show 70% of guys who experience ED don't get treated for it. Thankfully, Roman created an easy way to get checked out by a doctor and get treated for ED online. How about that? Roman is a one-stop shop where licensed U.S. physicians can diagnose ED and ship medication right to your door. With Roman, there are no waiting rooms, awkward face-to-face conversations, or uncomfortable trips to the pharmacy. You can handle everything discreetly online. All you have to do is visit GetRoman.com/CB. GetRoman.com/CB. Fill out a brief medical onboarding, chat with a doctor, and get FDA-approved ED meds delivered to your door in discreet, unmarked packaging. What reason do you have to not go see a doctor because of erectile dysfunction? All of those reasons are taken care of by Roman. GetRoman.com. You fill out that brief medical onboarding, you chat with a doctor, then you get those FDA-approved ED meds delivered to your door, again, in discreet, unmarked packaging. Guys, go online and get checked by the doctor. Erectile dysfunction is a problem that guys don't tackle, but with Roman, it's so easy. There's no reason not to do it. For a free visit, go to GetRoman.com/CB. That's GetRoman.com/CB. GetRoman, ROMAN.com/CB, like Cowboys Beat, for a free online visit. GetRoman.com/CB. All right, this is the Cowboys Beat on CLNS Media. I'm Ari Temkin, Patrick Conn. It's the Cowboys Beat with Ari and Conn. Most important move, Patrick, of 2018 for the Dallas Cowboys. Not the season, the whole year, calendar year. This is our last show of 2018. So what do you think? What's the reason the Cowboys are here in the playoffs? What move is the reason for that?
Chris Richard.
I had a feeling you were going to say that. Why?
I know you'd asked me this earlier in the week, and I said Amari, hands down. But I get to thinking about it, and I'm like, the backbone of this team is the defense. They're the reason they are where they are, considering what their offense has done. And you go and look, and it's, they essentially have played pretty much the entire season without Sean Lee. Something that used to be a nail in the coffin for this defense. And they played so much better without him. Leighton Vander Esch, the continued emergence of Jalen Smith.
Right, like you can isolate, the move of Byron Jones from safety to corner. Like that, that's a great move. Drafting Leighton Vander Esch, the emergence of Jalen Smith, Randy Gregory. I mean, he's been fantastic. Think about five sacks in the second half of the season after the bye week. But it sort of all goes back to one guy, right? Like,
to me, it's Chris Richard.
Yeah. Bringing him in, the style that he plays with, the swagger, the confidence. I mean, you talk to defensive players in the locker room and they just glow and go on and on about him. And the other thing too is the willingness for a guy like Rob Marinelli to sort of defer and not, let ego get the best of him. And that's like you almost have to attribute a lot of the success to Rod Marinelli sort of stepping away to a certain degree and, allowing a guy that wasn't hired to be the defensive coordinator to basically kind of take over in many ways and be the defensive coordinator. And Marinelli, throughout the year is basically saying, yeah, I'd be stupid not to, I'd be stupid not to listen to this guy and to implement things that he's doing and, all those things. Like it's kind of amazing the difference Chris Richard has made and the willingness for Robert Marinelli to not let his ego get the best of him and not let his ego get in the way of what's in the best interest in the Dallas Cowboys.
You know, it's interesting. It's almost like Rod Marinelli has been Monty Kiffin. You know, because Monty Kiffin came here, he brought Marinelli, and he kind of stood to the side, you know, and let Marinelli do what he's doing, and then now it's kind of like Chris Richard's doing the same thing.
But with Monty Kiffin, it was kind of like, hey, Monty, go upstairs and, like, don't talk. Like I feel like it was way more invasive with Monty Kiffin. Like Monty, they basically just gave him like a booth, and they were like, hey, you can kind of have a headset, but don't really have a headset. Like, this has been more of a, and you're right, because there is a similarity there, but this has been seemingly more of a collaboration. At least more so than Monty Kiffin. I don't know that Monty Kiffin was collaborating much with Robert Marinelli, because every time they'd show him during games that season, he was in the box, like, dazed.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was nap time, you know. As you get older, you got to get more naps in. So
yeah, I got a new board.
Yeah,
you need naps too at this age.
I think I think there's some instances of it where it's very similar, but right, yeah, and you know, bringing in Richard and letting him do what he's doing has been huge, and this defense, to me, has taken on the personality of Chris Richard. I mean, just the way that they are, and the way that the aggressiveness that they play with, the swagger.
Right.
I mean, did you like? I don't think Chris Richard would do this, but did you see the video of Antoine Woods doing the Eat the W in front of Jameis?
Yes.
Was that not the funniest thing that you'd seen?
It was amazing. It was amazing.
I was like, that dude's a savage.
Well, he's just got that personality, like just.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, it's, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the Legion of Boom, and I think sort of that reputation preceded him. And you talk to defensive players, and yeah, like the fact that he came over from Seattle, and guys, you know, young players like the Cowboys, like they know that defense, and so there's a huge respect for him and that defense, and so. You know, like that's important, right? Like having that reputation, and then coming in, and then, you know, having guys buy, and you know, I don't know. I certainly think there are a lot of openings in the NFL, and that he's going to get a look. You know, I also know that some of the teams, I mean, Cleveland, you think they're going to look at hiring an offensive-minded head coach. I would imagine Green Bay would too. So I don't know what other openings would be available. The Cardinals. You know, they're just going to fire a defensive-minded head coach, and they've got a young quarterback, but they go offensive-minded. So, you know, I look at some of the openings, and I'm not sure that Richard will get a head coaching job, but I certainly think in the future, you know, he will. And, you know, and look, my initial thought too on this discussion was Amari Cooper, because the defense was so good, but this offense didn't have a chance. Like this offense, this team is not a playoff team without adding Amari Cooper. Like John Gruden is almost singly responsible for the Dallas Cowboys being a playoff team in 2018, because he's just made their offense more credible. Now, it hasn't always shown itself in games, but I mean, you have a guy that's capable of going for 200 yards in multiple games. You've got a guy beyond Zeke Elliott that's a difference maker, and that's huge, right? You've got a number one receiver and one of the best running backs in football. Like you should be able to win pretty consistently with those two pieces. But it's like the offense is okay. The offense at times has looked good, at times has looked bad. It's inconsistent. The defense has been consistent all year. It was consistent in training camp. It was consistent through the preseason. It's been consistent through 15 weeks of this season. And when you go back to all the moves that have been made and all the pieces that are in place, the common theme of that is Chris Richard. And I don't know why he was fired in Seattle. And I think certainly there was an indication, nothing that he did. It was just kind of the need for a change of scenery. But what a benefit to the Dallas Cowboys, because this is a guy that has been one of the top defensive minds in the NFL, coming from one of the best, you know, defensive programs in the NFL. And it just seemed like the perfect guy in the perfect spot at the perfect time. And I agree, man. It's hard to disagree that the best move the Cowboys made in 2018 was bringing Chris Richard on.
Yeah, I think in a close second, and it's kind of like my 2A, 2B here. Amari and then Mark Colombo being named the offensive line coach, changing what they were doing back to what they had known, getting away from Paul Alexander, his philosophy. So it was kind of tough with those. I don't know which way I'd lean. But it's a good thing to look at all of the things in front of us, whether it's, the hiring of Chris Richard last season, if it's, at the end of last season, I should say, or if, you're looking at, Paul Alexander being let go and they, promoted Colombo, hire back Hudson Hawk, trading for Amari. I mean, there's so many things there that you can look at and point to, but it's hard to, overlook, Richard. I mean, I could make a case for Amari because I think even with Richard in this defense, if they don't get Amari, it doesn't matter because I don't think Dallas goes to Atlanta and wins. I don't think they go to Philadelphia and wins, and then this conversation is all for naught.
Yeah, good point. All right. This is the Cowboys beat on CLNS Media, and Patrick, do you think that the decision the Cowboys make for this game on Sunday against the Giants, whether to rest guys or not, do you think it has any bearing on the outcome of the playoff game against Seattle the next week?
No, I've never bought into that. I just think I know a lot of the negative feedback that I hear is like, oh, they can't rest because they need reps, they need this, they need that. I'm not trying to subject my stars to unnecessary risk. Dallas gains nothing by winning, and they lose nothing by losing this game. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
This game is no bearing for them. So my guys, if I was going to look at the guys on this roster who I would definitely not play this game, I'm not playing Tyron. I'm not playing Zach. I'm not playing Zeke, and I'm not playing Dak. Because if I'm going to be without my two best offensive linemen, I'm not putting my franchise quarterback on the field.
Yeah, and that's my biggest question mark for this team going to the playoffs. Honestly, like the red zone woes are there, but I'd rather, like, if I don't have a Tyron or Zach Martin healthy, then I don't have anything. Like, I don't have a shot.
And I know Zeke hasn't missed time other than a few snaps here and there for whatever he deals with on a daily basis. Why? Because he touches the ball more than anybody on the offense, with the exception of the quarterback. He's beat up. Give him a rest. And defensively, let's see, DeMarcus Lawrence has been dealing with a shoulder all season. I'd like to give him some rest, although I know he wants to get after Eli and pad those stats. I'm not going to play Sean Lee because I need him for the playoffs because you never know. I mean, you're going to need that experience. I just don't see a reason to play those guys. I mean, those are your, maybe give some, reps to some other linebackers so I'm not overplaying Jalen and Leighton.
Right. I agree. I mean, if you lose to the Seahawks in the first round of the playoffs, it won't be because you didn't play guys, because you rested guys. It won't be a rhythm problem. I think, like, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 100 other reasons why you'd lose the football game, and none of them have to do with, well, we rested those guys against the New York Giants.
No, maybe it's that you're playing a pretty good offense and a pretty good defense. Those guys are paid to play too, and that's the thing that kind of, grinds my gears to, so to speak, a little bit on it is anytime that something negative happens, it's nothing but blame, and it's like people forget, hey, those guys are paid too, right?
Yeah.
Those guys are paid to play football too.
All right, that's
maybe it's the fact. I was going to say maybe it's the fact that it's Scott Linehan can't get it done. That's my big thing.
Yeah, and that's certainly a discussion for next week. All right, that's Patrick Conn. I'm Ari Temkin. Make sure to follow Patrick Conn on Twitter, Draft Cowboys. You can read all of his great work, WFAA.com. But, of course, you can find all of that. Draft Cowboys on Twitter. I am at Ari Sports, A-R-I Sports. Of course, you can catch me as part of the Dallas Cowboys pre- and post-game show on 105.3 The Fan, and I stream every single day on Phantom at facebook.com/watch Phantom. Make sure to tell your friends about the podcast. Make sure to give a rating to the podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Patrick Conn. I'm Ari Temkin, and we are back next week, but for now we are out. Peace.